James. How are you?
Hi, everybody. Good. Thank you. Yourself?
Very well. You're finally back in office.
I am finally back in Dubai. Bit of a
Where are you
break.
guys based
Nice.
out of in Dubai?
We're in Dubai Marina.
Ah, nice. Cool. Awesome. So, James, I'm just gonna kick off with the first question that we were discussing yesterday. Okay, so your journey in the finance function has been very impressive with experience across multiple industries. But I want to know how the shift was from being a consultant at PwC to being an executor at high growth startups like Taraboot and Holo. And what is the two difference there?
Yeah, so as I said, I think when I've joined startups, like I've joined fairly early stage and I've joined smaller teams. So within that, I mean, within the consulting world, you're very focused on the project that you're doing and whatever that may encompass. When you move to the smaller startups and smaller teams, you're expected to do a lot more outside of finance, just because the reality is there isn't enough employees to do everything, and you don't have those truly defined departments yet either. So I think the biggest change for me was, I mean, I did 2 years in audit, 3 years in consulting, but it was all financial focused. Everything was finance focused. And then even when I worked in SME in between, it was a finance function. Moving to startups was really about getting involved in more areas of the business, trying to understand more. I think the first sort of task I ever did at Taraboot was a HR task rather than a finance one. So there is still that reality where 80% of my day is very finance focused, but around 20% of it is on other areas of the business. And I think as I've moved into leadership positions in startups as well, that 20% starts to get a little bit bigger. And you are a lot more focused on the strategy of a business. And then I think the other big changes for consulting, you go into, let's say, a government entity or a company or wherever it may be, and you make your recommendations and you make your plan for them and you hand it over and then you walk away. At a startup, you do a very similar thing where you come in, you make a plan, you put a strategy together, but then you actually have to do the work for implementing and executing on that strategy, which is a huge difference because, to be honest, if you make a plan for a startup, be that a budget or a strategic plan or whatever it may be, you may as well throw it out the window after about 2 weeks because something in the business will change. So having to continually revise those plans, make decisions somewhat on the fly is a big change. And then obviously, I mean, culture is a big difference between startups and the consulting world. I don't have to wear a suit and tie anymore, which is nice. But yeah, it's really just being across more stuff. The business is a lot quicker. And then executing on those plans that you have to make is a huge difference.
No, definitely. But also tell me, what about shift in different industries? Like I was going through your LinkedIn and you've worked in several industries like prop tech, HR tech, fintech. How did you adjust your financial strategy across these different industries?
Yeah, look, I think as a CFO, a lot of people will focus on top line when it comes to startups. They'll look at their top line revenue and believe that that's what needs to influence their strategy. But it's actually probably more pivotal to look at gross margin when you're thinking about the strategy of the business. That's really what gives you financial flexibility. So across those three companies, you're talking very different gross margins. And with that leads to a very different strategy. If you're a company that has high gross margins, you have a bit more financial flexibility and you can maybe spend a bit more widely than you would somewhere else. Whereas if you're working somewhere that's very low gross margin or thin margins, you have to be a lot more careful with how you spend capital. And then after gross margin, the next thing that you really look at in startups is working cap cycles. So if you're a business that is high cost of sales, you have a lot of times where you're out on a lot of cash, especially in MENA, where people don't really pay on time. You can wait a long time to receive your cash. That working cap management becomes significantly more important. And then as to actually adjusting to the industry, one thing that I've always done in my career is when I've joined a new business is probably in the 4 to 5 weeks leading up to joining that business, I will really immerse myself in the industry, whether that's watching videos about the industry, trying to meet people who work in the industry. And then really those first couple of weeks when you join, sitting with the founders, understanding the history of what they've done, understanding the industry, understanding how they want to approach the problem at hand is super important. I think there's a lot of transferable skills going from startup to startup. End of the day, finance is finance, no matter where you go. but it is the understanding of the industry is more in the strategic side of things, where what do we want to do as a company? How do we position? What sort of marketing strategies work in this industry? What sort of working capital challenges are we going to face? And really of that nature, I think it's just immerse yourself in it from day one. And even I'd like to say that when you start a new job, you have like a 30, 60, 90-day plan. What a lot of people miss is the minus 30, because that's really where it starts for you. And there's just so much material out there, right? Internet generation, you can find out anything you want about any industry. So you spend that first 30 days watching every prop tech video out there, listen to podcasts, whatever it may be. And I always, whenever I've onboarded, I've spent a lot of time pre-joining with the finance team that I'm coming into and with the founder, just having those conversations, so that it's so important when you join the startup that day one you can contribute.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that minus 30 time to do that, it's just you spend the first 30 days trying to learn the business and you're not contributing value during that time.
Yeah.
And you don't get that bandwidth in a startup, especially in a leadership position, to have 30 days doing nothing. So that for me is the key part. It's really that pre-joining that helps with that.
I would really like to get a hold of these podcasts and resources that you've gone through over the years, and share with our community as well, because I'm sure it'll help them out. They're about finance.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, there's a lot of good stuff out there, like the 0 to 1 podcast, which I think is always very interesting, because it's generally a different founder on it, and it's really talking about that 0 to 1 story, which to be fair to a lot of MENA startups, I mean, the majority of our ecosystem is early stage, right? There's not a lot of Series B plus companies out there. So if you're joining a startup in MENA, it's very likely that you're joining someone who maybe raised a seed, potentially raised an A, but it's still very early stage, and you're still very much in that 0 to 1 or 1 to 2 phase. So I think it's really there that focus on that, right? If people are looking for stuff out there, and then honestly, if you're joining an industry, learn about the industry you're trying to disrupt. So within Holo, I mean, we're primarily focused on mortgages. We do full service real estate, but it's our primary focus is mortgages. So what I was doing going in was, how does the traditional mortgage brokerage work? How do the traditional brokerages go after customers? How do they go after process? And you can even start looking in what are the financial challenges they face. And then the next step is look at players in our industry who are potentially in a different geography. There's huge players in the US and Europe with pretty much everything that people are doing in MENA. You can really look at them. Some of them are listed. You can even go back through historic financials. It's I'd expect most financial people to be able to look at historic financials and see where people made mistakes. So that's always great learning. And then I think there's a few good podcasts I like in the region. So Couchonomics with Arjun, I think is really great, and I think it's very MENA focused. So you get that more MENA sort of nuances with that, and it's very focused on the finance side of things. And then Alchemy Recruitment put out really good podcasts. It's very finance focused. It's more bigger companies, like more corporate companies talking about that. But there's still lessons to be learned. I mean, startups, we are disruptive and we're changing industries, but similarly, the big companies, they know what they're doing. You can learn from them. Wearing a suit and tie is not the end of the world. You can definitely learn from the bigger companies.
Definitely agreed. And what you also said, that just learning from the challenges of traditional companies, and then also looking at other players in other geographies who are doing stuff similar to what you are, really helps. Like when I joined Elan as well, that was my starting point, just looking at other international players in spend management, expense management, and definitely that helps a lot. And thank you for sharing all those resources. I'm definitely gonna go ahead and share that with our community here. You mentioned Holo briefly earlier. So let's talk a bit about Holo as well. Holo is a growth stage company, right? So how do you manage the financial challenges of a fast scaling business such as Holo, particularly around cash flow, budgeting, and expense management?
Yeah, so I mean, it's been an interesting year since I've joined. We've been growing roughly 3x month over month, which is phenomenal. And I think everyone in the business gets super excited about it. A finance function gets a bit more sweaty those kind of numbers, things get a bit tougher. And I would say the biggest challenge that we currently face is it doesn't make sense for us to have an annual budget right now. And it doesn't even particularly make sense for us to have a quarterly budget right now. So it's about that flexibility in spend, and we have to be constantly reviewing in terms of what's been working, where do we need to double down on spend, and it's that speed of delivery and decision so important for us. So putting processes in place for the team to come to me and request spend and be able to make quick turnaround on those decisions. I think the best tool that we have is the finance team here. We've built an internal model that's very flexible in terms of inputs and changing spend and seeing what that would mean for runway, for cash management, everything of that nature. Is so important to be able to just open up an Excel model, put in some new numbers and say, okay, is this something we can do? Because at the end of the day, although we make decisions with the business in mind, the role of a finance function is to look at the financial impact of those decisions. Is it something we can manage?
Yeah.
And then the other part is get really good with your accounting. Get perfect with your class recs, get perfect with your expense categorization, because so much of my time at a month end is spent going through our accounts, looking at where we've spent and sort of where have the big increases come from, where have we decreased as well is super important. And I think if your accounting is not perfect in those senses, it becomes very difficult. Like, you don't want to spend your time at month end saying, oh, is this expense in the right line, or is this a true business expense, whatever it may be. It needs to be spent saying, okay, we spent here, here's what we spent on, did that work, did that not work? That's where the real value add is. So I think a lot of people at startups, especially early stage, overlook the importance of good accounting. And I'll say to any finance leader joining joining a startup, if you do not have good accountants in your team, go out and hire it right now, or do it yourself, because it's the most important thing you can do.
Great, considering, you talked about all these decisions that you have to make as a CFO, I want to ask you about that as well. You're literally the man behind the money. So how do you see your role as a CFO in influencing decisions around, let's say, marketing, strategy, HR? Because historically, CFOs are looked at as gatekeepers for decision making. So how do you handle the constant questions and approvals that come your way?
Yeah, so I hate the term gatekeeper for CFOs. I think it's how they have been seen historically, and I think it's important for us as a function, right? This comes from the leaders within finance to change that opinion of people. So I think there's a fine balancing act in terms of being a gatekeeper and being someone who actively helps with decisions. The area that I think has been important for me is understanding I do not know enough about other departments, right? I am not the expert when it comes to marketing. I am not an expert when it comes to human resources. I am not an expert when it comes to operations. So what I try to focus on is when people are coming to do spend decisions, is asking the right questions for them to begin thinking about the right things. I'm not going to go to our head of marketing and say, hey, you need to do more TikTok spend. But what I would do is go to the head of marketing, have those conversations around what channels are working, what are other people doing. And it's not so much about trying to give an opinion or tell people what to do, but it's more about helping people get on the right thoughts in terms of what they want to do. That is significantly more important. If you go in with an idea that, okay, I'm the expert, I'm going to tell marketing how to do their job. One, you're going to be very unpopular and no one's going to like you. And two, you're going to stifle the business, because we hired these people for a reason, right? Like, you hire a head of marketing for a reason. You hire a head of HR for a reason. They are significantly more experienced in this department than I am. They will make better decisions than I will. But it's just about making sure that their thought process behind those decisions is correct. And I think the final part with the CFO is marrying all of that together. The different departments, all their spend requests, I need to put that together and look at how does that work for the business in totality. If it's something that we can do, great. If we can't due to cash restraints, again, it's not my decision to say yes and no to stuff. It's my thing to go back to people and say, well, you know what, we can't do 50K, we can do 30. How does that change your plans? And let other people make those decisions in terms of how it changes. And then I often see finance as like the controllers of data. Most of our business data sits within the finance function. It's then going back to those people, giving them the results of what they did. And again, it's not to tell them what to do and not do in the future, but just making sure people are equipped to make those decisions properly.
That's a great approach, honestly. I mean, you literally just like went ahead and told me how CFOs are considered to be gatekeepers and how to not be one and do the right thing. Coming to my next question, James, we've seen a lot of talk about AI and digital transformation lately, especially in finance. How do you see these technologies impacting the future of the industry?
So I'm not the most bullish person on AI as it currently stands. I think it will have a place in the future, but I think where AI currently stands is very much infrastructure builds. And I think at times it can become a bit of a buzzword for people to put into a pitch deck. I think what you do see is you see companies building really good AI use cases, and it's a lot more specific than the broad spectrum AI that we see out there, right? ChatGPT, phenomenal tool, but is it something I'm going to use consistently in finance? Probably not. Whereas if someone's built like a really great OCR AI tool for invoicing and categorizing that into an accounting system, will I use that? Yeah, I will use that. So those specific AI use cases, I think, are very, very good. And I think where AI really has its use is it's not taking away work from a finance function, but it's freeing up time to do the more value add stuff. So I'm lucky. I have a phenomenal team at Holo. Do I want those two spending all their time categorizing invoices and making accounting entries? No, I want them on value add. I want them looking at the performance of the business, looking at operational metrics, looking at where we can improve, because that's where my first feedback loop comes from, right? That I'm constantly asking them questions about the business. And if they're spending all their time doing menial stuff that can be taken on by AI, that's not a great use of their time. So I think it's still in its infancy, in my view. And I think globally, we're still trying to work out what is the best way to use AI. And I think there's a huge amount of fear around it taking away jobs and that kind of stuff. It's like, it's not. It's gonna improve your day to day. It's gonna put you on more value add stuff. And it's just gonna take away the time sink tasks that may currently exist. I first heard about AI when I worked in audit, which was 2013, 14. And they talked about how AI was going to replace auditors, that the audit sort of world was going to drastically change. I'd still speak to people who work in audit. It's still the same size teams. No one's lost their job because of it. But what it has done is it's made their work more enjoyable, and it allowed them to add more value to clients at the end of the day. So I definitely think there's a place. I'm picky with which ones I'll use, but definitely if there's good use cases out there that save my team time, I'm always looking at them.
So, are there any tools that you've currently implemented in the finance function that you are particularly happy with?
So the OCR stuff is quite good. I know this is an Alan call, but we actually use Casio for our spend management.
Okay.
And their receipt recognition is good. So that's great. I think on the expense management side, that's very, very good. We built an AI tool internally for our mortgage applications, which passes information to people from their documentation to make the application quicker. And that's something I've spoken to our tech team about. I think it has a potential use case for finance as well, that we're looking at the moment. But it's really that, like, anything that takes away accounting time for me is great as long as it's accurate. Even still now, I don't think OCR is perfect for the one we use, but it definitely does save some time.
Awesome. Okay. My next question's a little different. So I want to know, how do you look at hiring? Does educational pedigree matter more to you, or experience and willingness to learn and grow?
So for me, it depends if you're hiring into a corporate or if you're hired into a startup. So if you're hiring into a more corporate environment, first and foremost, I would look for someone's experience. I think education is important. in finance. And I think finance is probably one of the more educated functions out there, given that you get like professional qualifications and everything of that nature. And I mean, for myself, right, I have a bachelor's in finance, I have an ACCA, I have a master's in finance. Do I think all of that massively helps my day to day? Not really. I think it gives me a good fundamental understanding of finance, which I think is important. But if someone has the base level financial education, that's good enough for me. And then in the corporate, it's more about experience. And because you're hiring for more specific functions, right? You might be hiring accountancy or FP&A or an M&A person, whatever it may be. And for that, you need the experience. But in a startup, first and foremost, it's higher attitude. It's something you can't train in people. So you're really looking for those people who want to get involved in a lot of stuff, who want to get their hands dirty, who want to be across multiple things. Because if people have that kind of attitude in a startup, you can coach and train the rest. It's less important that they have the great fundamentals or they've had like a ton of experience in finance, because you need the attitude more. You need someone who's going to be sat there, and I mean, not every day, but you know that sometimes there's going to be a 14-hour day that happens, and you need people who are going to sit there with a smile on their face doing that, or who get a message from me at sort of 8 a.m. and say, we need to build a financial model today. Come hella high water, like we need to find a way to do this. And the people who don't see that as a challenge, but rather see it as an opportunity to do something super exciting, is really, really important. So I think always hire for attitude in startups. As you grow as a company, you get bigger and bigger, the expertise becomes more important, but you really can't coach attitude. So you have to hire it.
No, definitely agreed on that one. Like, I think in startups, you definitely need people who are go-getters and people who want to get things done. Okay, so James, last question. Let's talk a bit about the Middle East now. The region has become a hub for innovation in many sectors. How do you see finance evolving with the rise of fintech and digital solutions in the region?
Yeah, I think it's super exciting. One, because I think MENA is really starting to find its feet when it comes to startups and innovation. I think all the initiatives from the governments around the region as well are fantastic in terms of encouraging entrepreneurs and encouraging startups. And I think on top of that, we have a lot of capital availability when it comes to venture capital as well, which is exciting. And we're seeing people from outside of the region begin to invest in the region for the first time as well. I think, how does it affect finance? I think there'll be a lot of innovation in the fintech space that's going to improve it. I mean, if you look across spend management, just in UAE, we have Cashier, Alan, Expense, and a few others, just to talk about the big ones. And that level of competition creates better products, right? So if Alan is going head to head with Cashier and you're looking at, okay, what are they doing? What are we doing? The customer is actually the winner in that scenario rather than one of the companies, because they're going to constantly push each other to create better and better solutions.
Yeah.
I think you see that across a lot of fintech, like with the potential of neobanks coming in, that then begins to disrupt traditional banking players. And you see someone like Weo, who came out with a really good SME offering with banking, and it's caused the incumbent banks to really change their offering to SMEs. And you see a lot of people doing SME lending out here, which is now encouraging, again, incumbent banks to look at SME lending as a space. So I think more innovation within the region, particularly in fintech, is great for consumers and it's great for SMEs, just because the level of products is going to get better, the availability of stuff is going to get better. And then on top of that, I think competition within the ecosystem is something that we haven't always had out here. There's traditionally been a big player who wins in the space, but I think even if you look at the biggest space currently in fintech, which is BNPL, you have Tabby and Tamara, right? Who are genuinely competitive companies with each other that are really pushing the boundaries of what's possible in fintech. And I think they're almost the North Stars for the rest of us in fintech, right? That's what we're aiming for. But you see that competition just make things better and better. Like Tabby is a near perfect product for BNPL. Their app is phenomenal. And I don't know that it gets to that level without a company like Tamara pushing them. So I hope we see more competition. The market is big enough for multiple players. This is not a winner-take-all market. I think it's more comparable to the US, where you can see 3 or 4 players in the same space and they all do well. And the competition just makes all of us better.
Definitely agreed with all of that, James. Thank you so much for taking out the time again to do this. Have a great day. Have a great weekend.
You too. Thanks so
Take
much.
care. Bye
Bye.
bye.